Well, the Federal Corruption Commission has today been launched. But remember, the Labor government promised the new corruption body would not be political.
I think that a National Anti-Corruption Commission should look at serious and systemic corruption, and it shouldn't be directed by politicians, including by the Prime Minister, as what it looks at. It should be independent of political interference. We've made clear in the legislation that myself or any other politician won't make decisions about what goes before it. We want an independent commission that has the power to determine those issues themselves.
Yet the politicians couldn't help themselves. They've all been getting so excited in the lead up to the launch, and they've already lined up to refer highly political matters involving their enemies to the body. Labor says the body should look into Stuart Robert.
The allegations that a Member of Parliament, a former Member of Parliament, could be financially benefiting by the arrangement outlined in the statement are very serious and deserve further investigation. And I do note, of course, Mr Roberts' strenuous denial as to the truth of that matter.
No coincidence that whole affair, that whole press conference raised just before the Fadden by-election? The Greens, meanwhile, have listed 10 matters for referral. Funnily enough, they're mostly matters that target their political enemies in the coalition. On the list includes Scott Morrison's secret ministries, a $2 billion Morrison government health and hospital funding program, of course the sports rot scandal, the Stuart Robert matter again, and PwC leaks. And then, of course, the coalition says the body should consider the Brittany Higgins payout by Katie Gallagher and Mark Dreyfus and Labor, a story that we first broke here, that it would be referred to the Corruption Agency. So despite the protests, it looks like this body is set to be a highly political get-square mechanism from all sides of politics. And if the NAC does investigate ministers or shadow ministers, should these politicians that they're looking into automatically stand aside during the inquiry? Well, New South Wales Premier Chris Minns has made it clear that in New South Wales, he doesn't think a politician should automatically stand aside.
I think that it's important that there's not an automatic resignation or a suspension from public life while the inquiry is taking place. Now, there may be circumstances where it's absolutely appropriate because the evidence is overwhelming, but it shouldn't happen in an automatic way.
And I think he's right. ICAC has destroyed too many careers, ending the service of high-calibre public servants who at times later turn out to be completely innocent. But they paid the price simply for being investigated. But Chris Minns says this now, but it's interesting he didn't come out and encourage Gladys Berejiklian to stay on as Premier when she was being investigated by ICAC. And it certainly helped him politically that the watchdog took out his main opponent. In my view, ICAC would have been under pressure, or they might have been more inclined to make a finding against Berejiklian, because can you imagine the scrutiny and criticism that they would have come under for taking out a popular Premier during a pandemic when the state needed leadership if there was no adverse finding? But now with this new federal body, political parties need to think carefully about weaponising corruption agencies. Not only could it come back to bite them, but using a star chamber to deem someone guilty before they've even been investigated is the antithesis of our justice system. We've seen it in New South Wales, that ICAC has had unprecedented control over our democratic processes. It should be the people who decide who's the Premier, not a quasi-judicial body that more often than not gets it wrong. Well, let's hope this new national body operates in a fairer way.
Corruption is essentially about the misuse of public power, position or property. Corruption diverts government resources, which means there is less available to provide the services and benefits those resources are intended to deliver.
Joining me now is Justin Quill, partner at major law firm Thompson Gear Lawyers. Justin, thank you very much for your time. Look, what do you think about this trend of corruption agencies being used as a political football against someone's opponent?
Well, there's one thing we shouldn't be surprised about, and that is politicians politicising things. They'll do it every single time at every single opportunity, and they'll do it the sentence after they say this shouldn't be politicised. And look, 44 referrals when the doors have been open just days. So look, it shouldn't surprise us. It's disappointing. Justice Brereton, Paul Brereton, who is heading up the National ICAC, will hopefully be too smart for this, though. He said that most of the hearings, nearly all of the hearings, will be in private. Now, I'm generally concerned about that because I like to see transparency and openness in our court processes. But when you have politicians just being able to refer willy-nilly to this body, then that perhaps is a better way to proceed, that these things are heard in private and investigated in private. Now, of course, you've got the politicians announcing that they're about to refer it. That sort of undermines that whole point, though. So it's the most important thing in my mind is getting that balance right between not absolutely killing someone's reputation for no good reason versus openness and transparency. And that's going to be a really hard balance to find.
Yeah, exactly. I mean, and what we saw, and, you know, there might be questions to answer with Stuart Robert. We don't know, although he's denied any wrongdoing and there's no evidence that he ever received any money at all. The allegation from the disgruntled ex-husband is just that there was a plan to send him money, which, again, he denies, and that's from a disgruntled ex-husband. However, you know, you have Labor saying, let's not politicise this watchdog, and then you have a big press conference announcing that this matter should be looked into by the corruption body, and Anthony Albanese out in Stuart Roberts' his outgoing electorate of Fadden talking about integrity. So, as you say, a lot of hypocrisy there. But, Justin, I want to ask you your view on the Gladys Berejiklian matter. In my view, she's not guilty of corruption, as ICAC said. She was guilty of a breach of the Ministerial Code of Conduct. I mean, the ICAC admits there wasn't enough evidence or not enough wrongdoing to press charges. You know, what do you think of the findings that were made against her?
Look, it's interesting, isn't it? That on the one hand, they found that she acted inappropriately, if I can use that word, that catch-all word, but not enough to lay charges. We've got to be really a bit careful in what we say here, because Mr. Maguire, of course, is still facing other matters. But I think what we can say that she is guilty of is being in a relationship that didn't do her any good whatsoever. And that really does seem to be her worst offence, and that's not an offence that you can charge someone for. Frankly, I think if you could, we'd probably all be facing charges at various points in our life.
Exactly. The dodgy boyfriends and girlfriends.
Absolutely.
And there's no suggestion the two community grants that were at the centre of this, you know, there's no suggestion that those community organisations didn't even deserve the grants.
No, and it seems, in fact, that almost seems by reference to his press release, Mr. Maguire's press release, that will almost be part of his defence, that look how hard I pushed for my constituents. So yeah, look, it's a very murky, interesting, sad, frankly, state of affairs, made worse, I might say, by the delay that has taken place in this case.
Exactly. Justin Quill, thank you very much for your time this evening.